Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at the Bento skeleton, and I'm going to give a little tip or trick here to animate an unusual set of bones. So the new Bento project that Linden Lab is working on right now, the project is all about this new Bento skeleton. Now, I've changed it pretty drastically to fit this elephant, but there was one aspect. Originally, I used a bunch of different bones to kind of animate the elephant. Like the ears, before I used the wing bones, which are these up here, and I used those to animate the ears. But I'm doing it slightly different. I also used before the tail to animate the trunk. But this time I'm going about it quite a bit differently. And there is a problem with the trunk because in order to do it this way, which gives me a lot of advantages in Second Life with mouse looking, using your mouse to move the head around and things like that. So I wanted to use it this way, and I had all these extra bones in the face that I thought I could repurpose to create this trunk. And I'll show you real quick. If we zoom in here, I'm using a bunch of different bones here. This first bone is the skull bone. This next one is the face nose bridge. This is face nose center, face nose base, face nose left, face nose right, and then I'm using the upper cheekbone and upper cheekbone right there. So I'm using a mix of bones, and the problem with doing this is they're not parented together. Now, I could put constraints on these bones, but a lot of times there are problems with those constraints. Now, I've already set up some copy transforms for what I'm going to show you how to use. And I'm basically going to do, the way I'm going to animate this trunk is I'm going to create another set of bones. Now, Kathy Foyle brought this up in the Bento meeting last Thursday, and I thought it was a really neat idea for animating these unusual bone sets that you might create to make your creatures. And her idea was to animate from a completely different skeleton and then constrain these new bones to that new skeleton. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you today. This is like the perfect example of animating in this way. So what I'm going to need to do is create a brand new set of bones, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this first bone here in the trunk, and I'm going to hit Shift S and then go to cursor to selected, because that's where I want my first bone in my new skeleton to start at. So now I'll go to a new layer and I'll add a bone, armature. There we go. And I want to show the other skeleton. Well, that's the mesh. So I want to show the other skeleton so that I can match it. So I'm going to go to edit mode. Now I'm already selected on this top part of the bone. I'm going to move it down and match it up with, I'll hit side view so I can get a little bit more accurate. I'm going to match it up with the joints on my trunk. And then I'm just going to hit E for extrude, try and match it as close as I can.
E to extrude, keep extruding down, matching each one of these joints. There we go.
Now I probably want to name these bones. And the other thing I want to do, this is pretty important to remember, is I want to eliminate any unusual roll of the bone. See right here it says roll and I have a minus 90-degree roll. I don't want any roll, so I want to make that 0. I want to, and then to, in the bone part, I want to rename this bone, so I'm going to rename it trunk 1.
And then this one has a 180-degree roll. Eliminate that. And the bone, I want it to be trunk 2. This bone has a 180 roll. And trunk 3. Trunk 3. Another 180.
So we have our new bones, and as you can see, they all kind of move together. They're all parented together. This first bone, just to make sure it follows along with the elephant here, you also want to parent this to another bone here. So I'm going to go to pose mode. I'm going to go to constraints. I'm going to make it a child of, and this elephant is using named armature, the target, and I want to parent it to the head bone, which is this bone here. And as you can see, it snapped to the head bone, but all we have to do is hit set inverse, and now when I move that bone, all of the bones move together. Just like this one too. It's parented perfectly for a trunk, unlike our other bones, which are moving separately. So how do we get these bones, the elephant's trunk bones, to move with the new trunk bones? Well, we simply use a constraint, and it's a very simple constraint. It's a copy transform constraint. There we go. We want to go to the new armature we just created, and we want, this one goes to trunk 1. So just like that, this is parented to this bone now. Oops. So if I move this bone, that elephant bone is now moving with it. Okay, and sometimes you'll see some kind of residual stoppage like this where it's out of line, but if you just move your timeline, it snaps right back. Oops. Go like that. Okay, so now let's go to the other bones, and as I said before, I already set up these to quickly go through them. This is trunk 2. So this bone,
armature and trunk 3. Select it correctly. Trunk 4. Armature trunk 5. Armature trunk 6. Armature trunk 7. And armature trunk 8.
now if I move this bone, all of the bones are moving together. And I can even move each one of these. Look at how nicely those bones are all following each other. Now you can put some IK. There's also, you could also use Blender's auto IK. So I could, if I'm using auto IK, I can just move this around like this. And that works pretty well. But you could have, if you use auto IK, you could screw up your other IKs. But it's something to take into account. So now there is one more part of this that needs to be considered, and as you can see, as I move my timeline, that all just snaps right back in place. The other thing to consider is how the animations create keyframes. Now, they won't just automatically create a keyframe. If you move that other, let me turn the texture on so we can see all of this better. And let's take these bones and turn X-ray on. Okay, here we go. Something else you might want to do is you might want to create a bone group. So I have this unique set of bones, so I'm going to select all of these bones and I'm going to create a bone group. I'm going to call this trunk. There we go. And I'm going to assign those bones to that trunk, and they will turn a slightly different color. I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to change the color, and that will allow me to see them better in my dope sheet or my action editor. Okay, so as you see, when I move, let me show the other bones. This one. When I move this, it will create keyframes for these new bones that I created, but it won't automatically create keyframes for the old bones. So what you need to do is select these bones and right-click Lock Rot. And as you see, now the keyframes are created. So that's the only downfall of this, is you have to manually create your keyframes. And as you see, it works pretty well like that. But that is a quick look at using another skeleton to animate your bento rig. Have a good one, everyone.